Hello, everyone. My name's Ellie. You probably know me from apps such as Surf Demise, or maybe if this one gets popular enough, Surf Reverie, which I'm looking at right now. People tend to like my displacements. I think specifically my 3D skyboxes, but I guess also my caves. But I think when people want to know how to do displacements, they're mostly thinking about the 3D skyboxes. So over the last couple of years, I've had a few people asking me to make tutorials or just show them how I do what I do. It's not really that complicated, just a few tips and tricks here and there. So that's what this is. So this tutorial, yeah, just gonna do 3D skybox. I might do caves later. We'll see. To start off with, this is, of course, the finished world part of the 3D skybox. This is the 3D skybox part of the 3D skybox. I'm basically just going to be recreating something. Yeah, not going to do this level of quality, of course, but for this, so what I have is in a new VMF. Just copied these over just to save me time, but I will talk through how I do all this. Yeah, this is just the initial thing. You want to make this as big as possible. So normally when I'm mapping, I will, this will not be the first thing I do. I usually do all of the mapping, get an idea for how much space I can use, and then try to fill it up with this as much as I can. The main reason to do this, I mean, I guess it doesn't really matter. The main benefit is just there is always going to be some sort of a seam. I mean, you can hide it really well, but if you go in and look, it's always going to be there. So the further you push it away from where the player is, the player is just around here. It's, hopefully they can't see it. Something I will say as well is my method of doing this is I do all of my sculpting in the 3D skybox scale. So I use 1/4 scale. Don't use 1/16. I know it's a default. Like you use your grid. You have the grid. You should use the grid. I guess it doesn't really matter if you use 1/16. It just, I find it so much easier to work in 1/4. I've been wanting to move to 1/8 maybe, just because I find that all of the mountains I do, they really aren't to scale when you kind of look at the trees next to them. It's like this huge mountain with snow on top, and a tree is like 1/10 of the size, and it's like, yeah, it doesn't really work. So you could use 1/8, but all of my maps have been 1/4. So the way I do this is moving this into the 3D skybox scale. You need some sort of reference point to bring this back after you do that. So start platform, start zone, first ramp, whatever it is. This is just the start on the map. So you just copy, paste it in place. I've already done this, the normal stuff. You have your sky camera 000, and you just take everything and scale it. I've already done this, it's in some time. Hide these for now. And up here, scaled down. What you do then after that is you start adding in displacements. So this is the actual 3D skybox part. You will notice that they are larger than the ones in the world. This is entirely to do with limits. If you go show, if you go map, show information, you can see your displacements. 2048 for CSS is the hard cap. Apparently there is no way to raise this at all. It's hard baked into the engine, which sucks because I would like more. So I would say if you know you're not going to run out of limits, which can be hard to know from the start, once you start duplicating all of these, it adds up really, really quickly. You can maybe get away with this, but what I like to do is the further away from the player, the more I will stretch them out. And of course, this does have a drawback, specifically with Paint Alpha. The Paint Alpha is based on the actual size of each triangle. You're setting the alpha value per each vertice in it, so these larger ones, it will look a little different. But we're talking way over here. The player's right here. That's the idea. Is the further away, you need less detail. So I do it like that. Also notice you'll see how this is much larger than that because, of course, you need to duplicate your textures for the skybox. So just, normal skybox stuff. I also, usually what I will do is I will invert the alpha of one of them temporarily. You'll notice I have multiple different displacement textures here. Don't really need to worry about that. Do that if you want to. This is just so I can keep an eye on what the actual world part is going to be doing. Of course, I'm still not sure how the engine treats this, but it's just a really good idea to keep the sculpted part of the displacement actually within the skybox here. So I'm sure if I was to extrude this more so it went above here, it might have lighting issues. Definitely would. Who knows, it might even despawn if you push it far enough. So you always want to make sure that you keep these within, and yeah, you'll also notice how side to side these don't really change that much. It's mostly just straight up and down. That's another way I make sure to keep it just inside of these. Like if I'm going to do any sort of XY sculpting, I'll make sure it's always inwards rather than pushing it out, because it's just a real big pain in the ass if you have a bunch sticking out there and you have to go back and copy it back over and fix it. Now for surf demise, of course, as everyone knows, this is my attempt at making surf boreas. So decompiled it, basically used the same methods there. So massive shout out to Synchronize. We're basically pioneering all the ways that I do 3D skyboxes, and I guess also the caves. Just would highly recommend decompiling Boreas just to see what you can get away with using just very little and simple displacements. So I guess the very first rule for 3D skyboxes is only sculpting on the z-axis, at least at the start. You can maybe do some touches afterwards, but really this is all you should need. Again, slight side to side, but the overwhelming part of this is just straight up. All of this is being done. So displacement tool sculpt. These are the settings that I use usually. Usually keep smoothing, fall position, I set that to 0, then Z, and then thank you, hammer. Just go in here and you do whatever you need to do. I guess this brings me to probably the most important part about this. Displacements like to explode and die, make backups. I have done this for every single one of my maps. So demise made a nice 60, oh god, copies of it. Literally just copy and paste in backups, because it did happen multiple times where I was sculpting away and you do something that Control-Z does not fix, or you do something that crashes the game, but it also decides to save at the same time. So when you reopen it, all of a sudden there's no way to undo that. So just save yourself the grief of that happening, make backups. I also recommend auto so off. Just click so once in a while. That's all you need. This is extremely laggy. So this is how all of this was made. I mean, this obviously wasn't, but literally just sculpt tool, go in the Shift Z so you get a better view of it. Large brush, offset distance, I probably did 20 for most of this, and you just go in and you just start doing stuff. References are good to have. It's hard to make mountains look like mountains, but I mean, I think I went through 4 or 5 iterations of literally just destroy, create, and then started sculpting again. It's really hard to make it not look blobby. But let's jump back over to our example. I'll start doing this. I will say, so I'm not going to do that method for this. What I'm going to do is the new method I figured out, and I've been using this on a lot of my maps, and I really like it, which is paint geometry to start off with. I hate this tool, but and I can never remember how to use it. But it does have a really neat feature, raise to. So what you can do with this tool is you go in and you start on continuous mouse. This kind of sucks actually. and you start blocking out your mountains. And again, remember, I can't do this here. Even if that looked cool, this is just going to go outside of the actual world that we have. Hey, look at that. A nice example of Control Z not working. Take backups. Take backups. And I would take a lot more time when I'm actually making the map, but you just start doing some bullshit. Maybe go up to 4,000 for some peaks over here. So this looks horrible, and specifically, this is an issue. So a nice little trick that I found is what you can do is raise the power to 4, apply, back down to 3, apply, which breaks everything. But then once you sew, it sort of subdivides the placement of each. So now we have a couple more inside of there. And then you just do this a couple more times, and all of a sudden, it's not as actual vertices in here. So I just do this until I get bored. I don't think doing it more really does that much, but might as well. Do that. I usually click the button. So that took several minutes. I've never actually seen it fail, but just leave it alone. It's sketchy. Something I noticed here. I definitely intended to do this as an example for what not to do. I accidentally have 2 placements stacked on top of each other. It's very bad. If you see this, you're gonna have to do this whole process. I'm not going to, because this is a tutorial and I can't be fucked. So I'm just gonna delete the worst one and take this as some nice nice creative little structure there. I will sew that though. But we're just gonna pretend that's not a thing. So now after you do this, a little bit more smoothed out, next step I always do is pull back out the sculpt tool, and as you can see, it's starting to get laggy. I click, and then it moves. This will just happen over time, usually after you've been sculpting for a while. If you've been in Paint Alpha, it happens really quickly. Fix this, you just restart your program, which I'll probably do pretty soon. So this is just my method. You can do whatever you want, of course, but I tend to go through and just soften all the edges, pretty much just doing what the sculpt tool did, but better. Not the sculpt tool, the subdivide tool did. So after you do this, it's a little bit less ugly looking, but still pretty ugly. So now I'm going to do the broad shaping of things. So I use a massive brush here, and then I'll usually just go in and start, and then also I'll usually raise this a bit. The overall shape that I want it to take. Just going to hide this real quick. Pretend it's not there. I will say, when planning out your displacements, this is a pretty bad job of this because I just decided to do it. It's always nice to have layers. Go back to Reverie and show this. So when you're a player, you have this hill in front of another hill. It just will always make it more interesting. So even in this small amount that the player is moving around, they can still see this sort of depth happening. This isn't going to have that because it's bad, but it is what it is. So yeah, I'll usually at this step, this is, I would argue, the most important, and this is what I will redo. So what I would usually do before this is I'd make a backup of this file, and then like once everything's nice and smoothed out, the general placement, and I'll go in and start just the general shape of things I want. Then once I'm done with this, if I don't like it, I'll just, delete the file, copy back in the old one over, start again. Usually do this 2 or 3 times until I find something that I don't hate. So what's really nice about this is we're smoothing it all out, but that initial raise 2, what it did is it added in these flat surfaces. And these are pretty much impossible to make. I mean, they're not, but they're really hard to make just with the sculpt tool if you didn't do this. So this just makes it a little bit more rocky, in my opinion, just a little more sharp, I guess you'd put it. Just playing with heights. Maybe add in a little bit of variation here. Always remembering not to make the part that's in the world go too high or too low. I probably should have placed some more detail around here, but that's fine. See, big brush, small changes, always looking at the work I do afterwards. If you just go up here and just go like, oh, like you don't think this is actually going that far because you don't have a good perspective on it. You're like, okay, let's push this down a bit and then go in and look at it, and it's just like, oh no. So always small adjustments. Now, another thing that is you have to work around is you don't want the player to be able to see these seams. Usually, I'll hide this by just raising the part in front of it a little bit. But if you have something like this, you might need to actually go in here and just kind of push it down a bit. I won't be doing that because it is just tedious, but this is something I will do at the end of all of this, is just push down to make sure all of these seams aren't visible. So I think the general shape is fine. Little variation here. And once you have this, I would go back in smaller brush size usually and try and add in just a little bit more details, because you don't want just this rolly flat blobby stuff. Like I said, I should have done some of this over here, but even without it, you can still just start making up interesting details. I always find that just drawing lines just adds a nice detail to the map. So I'll usually just go around and start adding these lines. This is how I did Demise. I didn't do any of this. I pretty much just made a big blob and started drawing lines in it. With this, you're adding some of that depth, that layer to it. If you wanted like a rolling hill effect, it's pretty easy to do with this. And you can see how laggy it is. You get used to it. Or just restart the game more. Or you already did there more. And see, all of this is being done just with the Z direction. This also makes it so it's really easy to not completely mangle things. I mean, you can see here once you get into the corners with this low resolution, it starts to get a little blocky, but once we're up and close here, I'll also recommend when you're doing this to copy in your ramps. So I just know from the map there's some ramps here, which maybe push down, but you should copy those in and just like 90% of the sculpting work I do here, and I'll do some final little touches and tweaks once I copy it back over. But really, this is where you do the work. So whatever. I know there's ramps here. Push them down. Um, Good enough. Have a little wavy valley thing. These are a little blobby. You always want to avoid blobbiness. Which is why I like the method I showed earlier. Just avoids it. Now, once I do this, once I have the shape, again, this is not what I would consider up to my standards, but for now, this is fine. Another trick I do is in the subdivide the sculpt tool, go into carve. I think this has insane potential. I need to keep experimenting with it. So far, this is the only thing I've found that I enjoy using it for, but there just has to be more you can do with this. So I just draw a little peak like this, and this is basically what you think it is. You see this line here. This is going to be the red, negative, green, positive. Same tools and everything. But what this does is it makes things a bit spiky. So this is very smooth. I don't like smooth. I will actually just restart my game real quick. And now that I've done that, this should hopefully be a lot better. Of course, all my settings will reset. Here's what it is. Much better. So this is where I spend a lot of time. This is sort of the final details I'll put on things. Pretty much the same methods before. It just makes it not blobby. You can really mangle stuff if you go too hard on this, so I would recommend trying to avoid that. And so that's probably good enough. You see the general process. I would just keep doing this until I was satisfied with it, or if I hated it, I would start from scratch, like I would probably do with this. Like I said, I needed to make these closer in. Too much of a dramatic change, I guess. So once you have this, take it. Well, first you would make sure that it is somewhat uh, is somewhat in the middle, because when you scale it up, of course, you can go outside the grid. And then I would take this and I would align it back with the original. And that's pretty much the entire process. I will say, of course, you also need to do the paint alpha up here as well, and whatever else. Once you copy it down, you can, of course, now go in here and make whatever changes you want. But just remember not to touch the seam, like I'll usually do my screen stuff here. So go in and whatever interesting stuff I want in here now. Always remembering never to touch this. And usually you will end up touching it. And the solution to that is you just do the exact same things before. Just make a copy of that. You scale it down, you align it, sew them together, and then just copy it back down. So it just takes time, but you can fix it. Yeah, I think that's pretty much all the tips and tricks I have for this. Just make backups, slow, steady progress with a large brush. Always use a large brush. Never do this. Never do this. Never get. Unless you always want to be touching a large amount, and I always tend to just go in circles, slowly moving things. Now, of course, if you mangle stuff too much, you will be able to start seeing it, and just try not to do that. But that's generally how I do this. So yeah, leave any comments you have, questions you have, maybe like my video. Thank you.